I like to learn from other people and I like to really observe and listen. So I feel like there's a point where I'm like, am I being too hot-headed here? Am I being too stubborn? Or like, do they have a point?
So I'm looking at her like, what are you doing? And like, I can see everybody's faces like,
They were laughing.
okay.
You were laughing as well. You're like, what were you doing? I'm like, what did I do? You know?
The sapiosexual platter.
Whew, you know what I've learned? If you spend majority of your time waiting for people to clap hands for you so that you can do something or live life the way that you want to live it, or to start that big project, you're never gonna move. A lot of the people that are watching, I'm talking about you at home, you possibly have a vision, a project you want to do, a place you want to travel, but you're waiting for somebody to give you permission. On the podcast today, we're going to be speaking about self-validation. My name is Belsa Abo Ame.
I am Shatani Somalakai.
Welcome to the Sapiosexual Platter. Yes.
Yo. Deep.
I know.
Deep.
I know.
Yeah.
Do you know how this topic was sparked in my mind? The other day when we did the interview at the radio station on Mind the Gap. For those who are watching who don't have the context, we did an interview a few days ago where we're basically on Mind the Gap. It's a show by Ross and Massa. Or Mace
On Gabs FM.
on Gabs FM, and the it's a segment, but the total show is called Purple Nights. So where they're just talking about the state of entrepreneurship in the country and just how to activate it further. So as we're having the conversation, they were just basically trying to tap into our minds, and she said something so important where she was like, "How do you guys self-validate?" And I thought it was one of the most powerful and interesting questions I've ever been asked. I think Ross asked it. And I was like, wow. So just preparing for shooting today, I was like, okay, I think self-validation would be a good one to expand on, especially for entrepreneurs, because that's what we're trying to cultivate in people. And also for the place where we're trying to take the African mindset to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a powerful one.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way on radio. And I felt there wasn't even enough time to really get into it.
Yeah.
Because on a personal level, I think I've only really started to self-validate this year.
Yeah.
In my life. And it's only this year that I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't been self-validating, and it's affected so much in terms of the quality of my life and the texture of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a very important topic, and I can readily think of so many things that I didn't do in the past because I was waiting and hoping, or I was too scared to move ahead because there wasn't anybody like clapping hands for me or cheering me on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
So
are
it's-
those things?
Man,
Let's make
there's
it
there's
personal.
countries I haven't traveled to.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't explain it because like you're an adult, you have the finances.
Yeah.
But I needed somebody to say, go there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have gone, you know? And yeah, there's some, projects I wanted to undertake like on a creative level that I can almost feel palpitations before I even try to start.
Yeah.
Because it's like, why would I do it? You know what I mean? And it's like I need somebody to pat me on the back to say, no, you are a creative. No, do it.
Yeah.
In court, when I started, especially early on in my career, my colleagues, especially the ones who were close to me, would just get surprised by, why are you nervous? For the longest time, I would go to court. I would have everything ducks in a row, but I would have such deep, nervousness. And even after court, when people are telling me you did such a great job, it just never registered. It was, and I thought it was because maybe I'm a perfectionist or whatever, but it was deeper than that, because it was even just the internal fluctuation. Like, it was emotional. There was a lot of turbulence within myself. And it's only this year where I do something and I put a full stop on it, and I'm proud of myself and I'm good for it, and nobody needs to tell me anything, but it's taken me such a long time to get to that place. So I can imagine the number of people who don't even realize that the problem that they have is the fact that they aren't able to self-validate.
And what is that? What would you say self-validation is?
Being able to just affirm your own thoughts, your own actions, your own direction, without needing anybody to say, go left. You're like, I want to go left, and left is the right way to go.
Yeah.
And even if somebody says, I think go right, and I prefer right, and I whatever, you're just like, okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm going left.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a very important quality to have. Yeah.
Yeah, without needing external approval. To just say, this is what I want to do. I recognize my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, and this is how I feel about them. And this is
they're
what I wanna
valid.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're good enough. What's your experience with self-validation?
Oof, I feel like it's always ongoing. I feel like it's always ongoing. It's like different levels. It's like when you think, oh, I've mastered this level, or I get this. You then enter another level. One of the powerful things from the conversation on the radio was just talking about disruption and like how sometimes you have to become a disruptor of culture or status quo. And I found that in my journey, that was a powerful conversation because it mirrored back to me, my journey. And I was like, oh, this is what I am. I'm a disruptor.
100%.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so natural to me to disrupt or just play outside the margins, maybe because I've been outside the margins for so long. But even if that is my habitual nature, it's like, it doesn't stand out so much to me like it would to another person because it's me. But because I'm met by an environment where that stands out to them. It's like once you do something when you thought, oh my God, this is so natural. I'm going to just, be at a dinner and say, let's put our womanness together at the full moon, and think that is just like natural things to say at a dinner where you're hosting like very important people and think nothing wrong with it. And then see the shock in the room or people just giggle and laugh and be
we
like,
need
oh,
to give
that's
people
odd.
more context, because I feel like people are going to be like, what is she talking about? So a few years back, we were invited for this dinner. It had like, people at, high levels and women.
Yeah.
And, women who are doing incredible things in the country.
Yeah, and one of the guests was the former first lady.
Former first lady of the country. So, we go through the procession. It's amazing. And then at some point, we're doing kind of like a toast,
A prayer. It was a prayer.
Was it a prayer?
It was a prayer.
It was a prayer. So
prayer.
I think everybody had gone round and said something.
Yeah.
And then finally, Belle just kind of interrupts the moment. And
No, it
she's-
wasn't like that. We're all standing and we're holding hands to pray.
Yeah.
So before we held hands to pray, when we stood out and they said, oh, let's pray, let's just all get together and hold hands.
Yeah.
As we were moving towards holding hands, that's when I was like,
Yeah.
okay, guys,
You were just like,
let's call our womanlyhood.
you were like, it's I think it's a full moon.
Yeah, it's a full moon.
And when it's a full moon, this is what's happening.
in
and
a woman.
And you know what? This lingo or like this language is now common.
Yes,
with
but at the time
with
it
that
wasn't.
awakening of syncing your cycle with the moon and things like that. But at the time, it was still very like a new concept. So I'm looking at her like, what are you doing? And like I can see everybody's faces like,
They were laughing.
Okay.
You were laughing as well. You're like, what were you doing? And I'm like, what did I do? So
Yeah.
I think it's in such moments where you do stuff because naturally you're so disruptive without realizing that then when the shock of society comes into play, that's when you're like, oh my God, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Notwithstanding that at first you saw things with clarity. So that's when I think, for me, that's when my self-validation gets challenged, because I like to learn from other people and I like to really observe and listen. So I feel like there's a point where I'm like, am I being too hot-headed here? Am I being too stubborn? Or like, do they have a point? And it's a thin line. It gets confusing because it's like, how do you then maintain, self-validation, which is a very confident thing
Disposition?
to uptake. It needs a lot of confidence, borderline close to arrogance. So how do you then measure yourself to say, I'm self-validating, but also I am holding back from not being too egotistic, or I'm also seeing this the right way. Like, that's their thoughts, these are my thoughts, they have it wrong, I have it right.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's so tough.
Am I self-validating, and is it a healthy thing, or am I just being stubborn? Because
Exactly.
there's people who are just, this is nothing to do with self-validation. You're stubborn, okay?
So how do you even draw the line? Because I think that's where, for me, when I go through such moments where I say something that was such a truth in me, and then met with the shock in society, and then I'm just like, oh my God, did I just take things to the extreme, or like, what is that? Or
what's going
even
on?
being in that moment, being like, these people, they don't even understand. They are like way behind the times. Like, how do you draw that line? Because even in that example that you gave, for me, it wasn't necessarily a new concept. In the Setswana culture, when it's a full moon and a woman is ovulating and they have a period, it's called Omo Kgweding.
Yeah.
So meaning the month.
Yes.
So for me, it was more of Setswana as opposed to like a concept. So for me, it was just an opportune time to be like, let's take things into the intensity. But people were not aware, but it's okay.
It's okay.
So I had to self-validate.
You had to. And I love that about you, by the way. But before we get to like exploring the paradox or the dichotomy between self-validation and ego, let's, go back to the roots of it.
Okay.
Why is it you think you're so good at self-validating?
You think I'm good at self-validating?
I think so.
Really?
I think it just comes more naturally to you.
I think I have struggles though. I think I have struggles, and that's why I was giving that an example. It'll be like a shock to my system where I sit and I'm like, what did I do? Yeah, so I don't know. I think at the core of it though, how I'm able to let go of it is I accept my humanity. Like, I accept everything about me, the light, the dark, the good, the bad, the wrongs, the rights, like everything. So even in such an instant, there's a freedom where I say that needed to take place for whatever reason. So I release it because at the end of the day, I accept the humanness in me, and that was just a part of it, and life goes on.
So you have like almost like a system that you've developed where if it wasn't the right thing to do, well, I'm human. Right?
Literally.
Or if you have a confidence about it, then you're like, well, I can, stand by what I did.
Yeah.
So either way, whether I was right or wrong,
Life
goes on. I love that. But let's talk, I mean more like in terms of, how the way we are raised kind of affects our ability to self-validate. Because in my journey, I realized that a lot of how I was raised has had an impact on my ability to self-validate.
Expand that. How was your self-validation mechanism compromised by, or like what was your experience and what were the negatives and the positives?
So for me, it's like I realized like self-validation has a lot to do, at least in my context, with a lot of emotional regulation.
Yes.
So for me, it's linked to my attachment style. So when I learned my attachment style, which is anxiously attached, meaning that I rely on a lot of people to self-soothe.
Yeah.
And because life is feeling, it's like, it's one thing to get like, get an applause to say, wow, you did really well for that. Yeah. But if you don't feel it within yourself, then it, impacts the experience.
Yeah.
So
the reception of it.
The reception of it. So everybody just clapping your hands and you're just like, you know what I mean?
Awkward,
And so like then in some of the things that created the anxious attachment. So, for example, I know my mom was totally playing when we were young, in a way that when she used to scold us and to try to get us to do things, if we didn't do them, she'd say, you know what, I'm going to take a transfer to another like location and leave you guys here. And so in my young mind, it's like, oh my gosh, my mom's gonna leave. I better wash the dishes. I better do this. You know what I mean? And then it just impacts the way that you attach, because you feel like you always have to be doing something in order to prevent people from leaving you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Then it's like, but in this moment, I believe that for me in my life, I need to be doing something else. But I'm not going to do it because that may mean that may be a risk in terms of separating from somebody that is close to me.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? It's
I
like
do.
if you're afraid to take risks because you don't know how that'll impact the connections that you have in your life.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult then to make decisions for yourself and then to self-validate and say, well, this works for me.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? And so I was able to identify that the root of that, even though it wasn't intentional and there was no ill meant behind it, it was just
Yeah.
a strategy for how do I discipline and motivate.
Yeah.
But it created like this, like, oh my gosh, I'm scared that if I am true to myself,
Yeah.
I may not still be loved. And then that carries on into adulthood,
Yeah.
into my profession, into different things that I want to do, because again, they're different.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always that, like, oh my gosh, if I take this step, are the people in my life still going to be there?
Yeah.
And I think there's an episode where we talked about it, where it was like, I was like, yeah, I can't express this. And if I do, and you would come back, I'd be like, oh, she's still my friend.
Yeah.
Shocking. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's over time when I started learning to self-validate, I was like, oh, okay, I can stick to my ground.
Yeah.
We can all throw our tantrums.
Yeah.
She'll go over here. I'll go over there.
Yeah.
This is not the end of.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it was a home thing. I know for others, maybe it may be a school thing, like the school system,
Yeah.
where like you are a smart person, maybe you're good with your hands, but then you go to school and they're like, well, you're not really a smart person because you didn't get an A, you didn't get a B or whatever.
Yeah.
So I can see how perhaps the way we're culturalized and the way people value school so much can have an impact on people's self-validation.
Yeah.
So I think that the root is in our childhood, in different experiences in our childhood.
Yeah. Definitely the foundation of whatever mechanism you use to validate or self-validate. The foundation is laid in your programming and naturally your childhood. But when you're speaking, I also just thought to myself, self-validation is experienced differently according to whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Because when you're an extrovert, you obviously you get stimulated by your external environment and you spend a lot of time interacting with different people. That ultimately their opinion starts to matter, and also because the lens in which you experience the world is cultivated and charged by the
But
external.
the external, yes.
You then put a lot of importance and value on external opinion. And then I think for introverts, introverts tend to have a lot of intrapersonal skills. And then extroverts tend to have a lot of interpersonal skills, relation with other people, introverts' relations with themselves. So when you're an introvert, I feel like the experience of self-validation is a bit different. It's almost like you're given a bit of a head start because the tool that you use to charge up your being and to wire your lens is a bit external for sure, definitely, because we have a bit of both, but mostly to do with yourself. So at a point, you're going to realize as you spend time with yourself that a lot of what I'm experiencing in the external environment is so different to what I feel and what I think and what I perceive, that the only way to keep some level of sanity is to really sit with those thoughts and feelings and really validate them for life to go on. Because it's harder to go take the conversation to somebody outside and be like, this is the crazy shit that I was thinking about. Excuse my French. So you sort of sit with yourself and have those conversations a lot with yourself that at a point, in order to cope and move forward, you're going to have to big up yourself in some way or create a perspective that enables you to move forward. And I'll draw attention to my foundation of my self-validation. It was actually also trauma, where I had a mom and dad who were separated, since I was 3 years old. They stopped talking. I think the first time they talked was maybe 20 years after the fact, but they stopped talking. So at a point, you sort of have like a reality distortion where it's like, okay, this is the experience this side, and this is the experience this side. And it creates a dissonance in you that I think when I look at kids who are affected by divorce or separated parents who are extroverts, the impact would be very different to me, myself, who was an introvert and said, okay, how do I make sense of what I'm experiencing? How do I align this, this reality to a perception that enables me to move forward? And then it had to be a lot of self-validation. And I think also the pain of what I was experiencing at the time, it also had to be a journey of self-validation with what I know of God. Because I was so confused, like, God, if you love me, why would you have me go through all this trauma from since I've been 5 years old? And then I have to really have a lot of faith, because my experiences, and for so many years, I think 8 years consistently of my life, it was a confusion, because then I have to believe in this thing, external and or internal, now that we've learned many years that God is within us, believe in this thing and say, surely you're challenging me for like some level of excellence and some greatness, that you're preparing me for something.
And Pastor Bell.
And validating that over and over again. Validating that over and over again, notwithstanding that the external met me with different
variables.
Yes, that were not the most motivating. So, I think an element of self-validation also is influenced by that. I was just sharing that to say there's an influence of extroversion and introversion. And it's like, for the extroverts, I'll just say, borrow from the introverts. Like, ask them more like, what do you guys do in your alone time? Why are you guys so quiet? Or
why are you by yourself?
What
are you thinking about? What's happening?
They're busy chanting mantras in those moments.
No, they're busy self-validating.
I'm telling you.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So that's that.
Well, that's powerful. I mean, but drawing from some of the experiences you shared about like your childhood and like sort of like maybe like your mom's approach, because she's also quite like a radical in her own right. And I know that
thank you for that.
And I know, and I've experienced it where we're doing something and we know that we can count on your moms actually to just kind of back us, because they're kind of like baring
my mom was that actually. Thank you for that, because that was the positive aspect of it all. I was bullied. Where it came from, I was actually bullied when I was young.
Yes, I remember that story.
So I have a very big head, big forehead, big chin. And, the prettiest girls, what they say about them and the foreheads and the chins, right? Self-validation. So I had a big forehead and a long chin, and I was very lean even then, because I think a fuller face makes it less pronounced. And I just got bullied for it. They would laugh, what the hair went out, and I said, you got a puff, and I had 2 shillings, and the kids will crack out. Puffana is this African glass that we used to drink. So it's quite big. So when they say puffana 2 shillings, 2 shillings doesn't exist. They're trying to say like the cheapest puffana, the smallest one, your chin looks like it. So they'll crack up and laugh. And I'd go home
I
crying.
can't even laugh at that. I don't condone bullying. I don't like it.
So I would go home, to cry to my mom to say like, yo, this is what the kids said at the playground. And then she was like, go back and tell them that is why you're the most beautiful. And I really believed it when I was young.
Mom,
So I'll go back to the playground and I'll be like, you're jealous because I'm so pretty. And I think just even in life, I also had a very controversial personality or persona. My external appearance and my internal are very bipolar opposites, you know,
yeah.
and a lot of people don't understand that. So even I remember when I was in England, I'd go out, you know, partying, and I would wear the sexy stuff. You know, I was young and, you know, sensual goddess. So I'll just be wearing my fun, sexy outfits, and I'll just post mindlessly on social media. So people were consuming in Botswana, obviously, which is more of a conservative environment at the time. I like, oh my God, is Belle really in law school? You know, is she is she really like in varsity because the things she wears?
She's posting,
you
and
know?
yeah.
Because it was just always me out. If I'm out for lunch, I'm posting. If I'm out at the club, I'm posting. So I never
Yeah.
used to post the school stuff, but also the type of outfits that I would wear. And then like obviously it would affect me, but because my mom also knew me, I'd call her and be like, can you imagine? Apparently I'm not in university, and I'll be so affected. Then she'd be like, what is that? Next time you even wear a skirt, make it shorter. Make it shorter so that they would have more things to say. And I think just that carefree nature that she raised me with, and also she allowed for a lot of independence and exploration. She didn't confine or box me to her reality and her identity or the fears that she had. Some of them, sure, but she was just always like, I don't get it.
But do you?
But do you?
Yeah,
If I
yeah.
went to her and I'm like, yo, Ma, I think you should turn this house into like, you're only getting a 2-bedroom, 2.5 from it. I think you should turn it into a multi-res. It'll cost you 2 million. Let's do it. She'll be like, okay, let's go. And such things at a young age, I think in my early 20s or mid 20s, 24, 25, that's when I went up to her and she agreed to that. So even such things cultivate a level of risk taking and entrepreneurship in you, because you become a disruptor knowing that, as you said, your attachment style, where you are attached, you're sort of, you know, given a lot of confidence.
Cushion.
There's a cushion and
Yeah.
a security, and you're encouraged with many different ideas. And it's a privilege. It doesn't have to be on a million scale. It can just be even at home, your child saying, Mama, ke so pedi, I'm an artist, I want to sing. And then you're just like, let's figure this out. How are you going to become the best singer in the whole entire country, world? And I'll give you 10 pula or 100 pula to book that studio or pay the deposit, you know?
Yeah. So no, that's it really. Like you can't downplay, the impact of our environment
Yeah.
on our ability to self-validate.
Yes.
You know, and I love that because like I said, I've seen it in action. For people who are listening and wondering like, how do I know whether like I'm good, I've self-validated or not? What do you think are the signs that somebody has reached a place of self-validation?
One of the biggest signs of like deep self-validation, because self-validation is on different levels and you keep ascending to those levels, but where you can really individualize and have independence of thoughts, feelings, and actions, I think the biggest sign of it is just people who move in silence. Like move in silence, private. You don't need to announce different things. You just in an execution mode.
Yeah.
Just like execution. Like I want this.
I do it.
I do it.
Yeah.
I thought of this. I do it. No need to. So I'll be like, you know, I was gonna do this thing, and wanting people to say stuff. So I think for me that's the biggest one. When I see people just moving in silence, not announcing, and then maybe you hear it years down the line, I'm like, oh, that's somebody who doesn't care to be validated. Yeah.
love
How about
that.
yourself?
I agree.
Yeah.
Like no input. No input, you know.
Yeah.
And you know the one thing I did last year, for my birthday.
Yeah.
I remember that was a nice moment for me because I remember I just made a decision.
Yeah.
And then I went to the studio.
Yeah.
And then I got a videographer and I'm just gonna do it.
Godile.
And I was like,
Oh,
"Ke
mosadi."
mosadi." And I posted it and I said full stop. And I remember that day was my birthday. And I remember feeling like I don't need a birthday gift from anybody.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest gift I ever gave myself.
Yeah.
To say this is what I feel like doing. And I did it with zero input from other people.
Yep.
And I just made it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. So guys, here's a challenge to you. How many things have you not done? How many things are you holding back because you're waiting for me, for Belle, for Bob to clap hands for you? It's time that you start listening to your inner voice. And so we challenge you to do something, put it in the comment section and do it without anybody's approval. My name is Shatani Somalakai.
And I am Belsa Abo Ame.
You've been watching
The Sapiosexual Platter.